Retro Groove. Enjoy your voyage. Retro Groove. Retro Groove. Retro Groove.
Howdy and welcome to Retro Groove. I'm Adam C.
And I'm Liam D.
And this is a podcast where we talk about music that stands the test of time, the albums and artists that have shaped and reshaped the sonic landscape, as well as covering new music from those artists. I am back from a little hiatus, and Liam, thank you so much for holding down the fort, man. It means a lot.
Of course, I'm glad to have you back. We had a lot of fun, but it just wasn't the same. And I apologize that we did talk a bunch of Weezer, which I'm sure that you and I will talk at some point. We got Pinkerton's anniversary coming up soon, so yeah. I figured maybe you and me and Dan can sit down and talk some Pinkerton at some point soon. Yeah,
that'll be great. I mean, as if there's things to run out of to talk about regarding Weezer. But no, it means a lot that you were able to do that and give me a little bit of time to get some stuff situated and
of course
get back into the flow of, you know, having two kids in elementary school and all of that. It's been a pretty major adjustment, particularly with COVID and everything still.
Yeah, it's bonkers.
Yeah, still doing its thing, unfortunately. And seeing a lot of concert tours being canceled.
Yeah,
unfortunately, a lot. I was thinking 9 Inch Nails, Stevie Nicks. This just off the top of my head. Pixies, lots of tours being canceled. So,
and a lot of them amending their situations that they're saying that they're not going to go to certain venues or cities unless that there is proof of vaccination, masking, whatever it is. So there's a lot of that going around for sure.
Rough time still right now to be a music fan. I was hoping that by sometime this fall, I would either go see the Hives this October, but I don't think that's going to happen now.
Yeah.
I'll probably hold off. Even being fully vaccinated, I just being around a group of sweaty people screaming, you know, even if they are all vaccinated, it's like there's been enough breakthrough cases that I'm pretty much gonna wait it out, and I'll come back to live music in 2022 hopefully. But
yeah, I hear that. I'm regretting. My buddy had talked me into. He's a big hard rock fan, and he talked me into going to see Megadeth in a couple of weeks.
Oh wow!
And so I bought the tickets, and I'm like, I'm fully in. Like, I'm not gonna abandon him, but I'm like, as things are changing, I'm like, man, that's not a crowd I want to be immersed in. But it's outdoors, so I'm not super stressed.
Outdoors is a little bit better.
Yeah, but still,
wear 2 or 3 masks, so you'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You might not be able to breathe, but at least you won't be inhaling anything that'll infect you. So, lots to talk about today. We've got a new segment called Expand My Mind that we're going to get into a little bit later on side B. But first and foremost, as usual, Liam, what have you been listening to and any recent album purchases?
Yeah, so I recently took a road trip with the family. We went up to Maine, never been before. Beautiful place to be.
Love it there.
Yeah, it was great. We got an Airbnb. My wife set it up. And when we got there, the instructions were to check in at like this place called Puffer's Place or Puffin's Place or something like that. And we were like, that's weird. Maybe it's a restaurant or something. It was a full-on dispensary. Oh, and so she goes inside. I pull up and my kid's with us, and she goes inside to figure out what we're supposed to do there to get the key. And the place that we stayed at was run by this dude. It was like just down the block from this dispensary. And I'm looking at her, and look, I don't really smoke. I'll if you got an interesting edible maybe, but she gets back in the car. We both have these funny smiles on our faces. My daughter has no idea what we're smiling about. and I'm like, did you have any clue? And she's like, no, how would I have known? And I'm like, watch, we'll go on the Airbnb site and it'll be like a dope joint, you know? smoking views. And it wasn't, but we just spent the next 5 minutes coming up with like how this place is high in the hills.
Yeah,
like
Is this street number 420?
yeah. But what I did do, what I did do, which I try to do everywhere, is find a record shop that I can hit up just to see what the scene's like. And so it was pretty far from where we were staying, about a half-hour drive, but we had to head over there anyway. There's a chain in that area, and I hit the one in Bangor, Maine, right down the street from Stephen King's house. And it's called Bull Moose. So shout out to Bull Moose.
I have been to a Bull Moose before.
You've been to a Bull Moose, man. So my big thing there was that I should have done my homework and realized that they are not just like a small vinyl record shop. They are CDs, DVDs, video games, books, everything. And honestly, like my shopping mentality changes when I know that there's a good selection of used CDs as opposed to like just perusing some vinyl. So I went in there and I felt pretty ill prepared. But I grabbed a few things. I never had Wu-Tang Forever, that album. Like I have 36 Chambers, but I was like started kind of scanning to see what I could get for cheap. I got that. I've been really getting into the Magnetic Fields lately. So I grabbed one of their CDs that was like $5. And then I grabbed a reissue of an old National album. They reissued some of those called Sad Songs for Dirty Lovers, which I'm super not familiar with. And I picked up the new Lorde album, which has kind of gotten some funky reviews. It's super different from her other stuff. She kind of puts it as like a Laurel Canyon sounding, more like outdoorsy, folk-friendly version of her sound. I'm liking it a lot. I bought it on vinyl. It's good to kick on around the house. I do think that she probably should have maybe I can't tell somebody what to do with their career. So it's not my place, but it would have been interesting, I should say, if she had gone with someone other than my favorite, Jack Antonoff, for this one. I think he suited that last album really well, that like intensity of a breakup and finding yourself and all that. I would have loved to lean into the psych side of this and go with like a Kevin Parker, Tame Impala, or someone in the war on drugs area, like something Fleet Foxes, like anything in that realm. I think could have been a really interesting dynamic for what this album is. But it's still great, and there's some catchy stuff, and she's fantastic. So yeah, all around, and then just a lot of radio, a lot of, I don't know if you've got staples for driving music. I brought it up last week, the last episode, but that new Yola album is so good. And I just listened to it on repeat over and over again, like 3 or 4 times. I thought my wife was going to kill me, but she got on board with it. I definitely, whenever I have a road trip ahead of me, I try to identify 1 or 2 albums that I'm going to listen to at length. Because I feel like it burns a memory, like especially if I've kind of curated it and picked it the right way. There are definitely trips that I have that are now interwoven with the sounds and songs of certain albums.
100%.
And it's something super special to do. I love doing that.
I've definitely experienced that. And then when you go back and listen to those albums, it brings back a flood of like good memories from the trip. So I'm with you on that 100%.
It transports you, man. There's some records from back in the day where I can like smell the beach that I was at, or I can like, it feels like I'm back on the rocks climbing a mountain or something.
Man. Yeah. Now I want to take a road trip. I'm ready. I'm ready.
What about you?
Well, I did, with just being so busy with family stuff and getting back into the back to school mode. I haven't really been able to get back out to the record shop. I did buy Spoon's album Transference, and I think it's one of their more underappreciated albums. It kind of came out at a weird time, and it didn't have like a big radio hit. You know what I mean? It doesn't have an underdog on it. It doesn't
Right.
have I turn my camera on. It's a little bit more kind of understated. But it really has grown on me, and it's got some amazing songs on it, and I love it. And it's now down to one more studio album, and I will have every Spoon studio album.
What is it?
I know they've got a few EPs. I have the Soft Effects EP. But all I need is a series of sneaks, and I will have every single Spoon studio album.
Nice.
Yeah, I can't
Awesome.
wait. I'll make a big Instagram post about it once I finally grab it.
Yeah, I don't think I know that album either. What is that?
That if memory serves, is their
second album, yeah.
album. And it's kind of a transitional album because if you go back and listen to the first full length, it's very different from most of the other stuff that came later. It's kind of a lot more like kind of 90s alt rock and not as much of the real rhythm heavy. It's still there, but it's not nearly as prominent as the albums that came after. A series of sneaks is like a good in between those two. Definitely it's got the crunchy alt rock in there, but you start to get those interesting kind of jam out rhythms that Spoon is their signature. So that's the last one on my list, and it's probably my least listened to. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's so much good Spoon material out there that it's it's not one that I go to very frequently. And I don't want to just cheat and like buy it off of Discogs or something, which I totally could, but I want to try to find it in the wild to have that moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, support your locals. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I could order it directly from, I think it's Matador, which, that's fine. But
yeah,
it's cool when you can just, boom, you got it in the wild, and that I get the last piece of the puzzle. I got the whole discography. So, and I don't do that with every band, but the bands that I really, really love that are my favorite, I want the whole discography.
Yeah. You just wind up with a big shopping list on your phone then that you got to scroll through. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank God for Discogs for the wish list and the collection tracking, if nothing else. Cause I'm over 200 LPs at this point, and it gets to the point where sometimes I'll come across something cool and I'm like, wait, do I have this? And I'll have to go and look and see if I have it or not.
Yeah.
So that is my next acquisition, definitely. As far as listening to like in the car, Dan on the Discord reminded me of Phantom Planet, and I wasn't as big of a fan of their first kind of big release called The Guest, which had California on it, which most people probably know them for.
That's what you know.
And it's a good album and there's some great songs on it, but it's just not one that I go back to a lot.
Sure.
Their 2004 kind of reimagining of the band, that album is what really grabbed me, and it's just a great driving album. It's really hard hitting. The production is really aggressive and punchy, and it just feels so good to blast it really loud and drive to it. You can definitely hear the Strokes influence, because once the Strokes hit, every band started sounding like the Strokes a little bit.
Yeah.
So there is an aspect of that, but I think it works really, really well. They really rock out on that album, and I love it.
Yeah, I think of right around that same time you had OK Go, you had Hot Heat. Like there were a bunch of those bands in like 2002-ish. Like the Strokes had kind of hit the scene and
Kings of Leon.
Yeah, for sure. That sound really, really hit. But Phantom Planet, Jason Schwartzman, right? For the first two albums, I think.
Yeah, first two, I believe.
Yeah, it's very cool. Cool band.
And then I've been also listening, for some reason, I've been just really on this heavy rhythm kick. I've been listening to The Dead Weather, which I go back to every once in a while. I think I've said on the podcast before too, out of all of them, definitely my favorite Jack White vehicle. I just love the vibe of that band. And it's just the groove and the rhythm. And again, the punchiness of the production is just like unmatched. And then kind of on a lighter side, I've been digging deeper into a lot of the Paul McCartney solo stuff. I've been watching the McCartney 3-2-1 on Hulu. I don't know if you've gotten a chance to look at that yet.
No, not yet. No, is that the
but
Rick Rubin thing?
Yeah, he sits down with Rick Rubin, and it's really cool because they actually go back through old Beatles and McCartney master tapes and or multi-tracks, so that he's actually there. Rick Rubin is at the board soloing out stuff from Beatles songs that you've heard 100 times, and it's just so freaking cool. And he's asking questions about like, what is this? Like, how did y'all record this? Or how did you come up with the idea for this? And he's just as a fan and a producer picking Paul's brain. And it's just so fascinating for, someone like me who's a ridiculously huge Paul McCartney fan. So I did something that I haven't really done before, which is to dive deeper into the Paul McCartney solo stuff and the Wings stuff. And I mean, I was always a fan of the Wings songs that everybody knows, but I bought the Band on the Run LP a few weeks back that I think I mentioned. I've been listening to Ram. I've been listening to the first just self-titled Paul McCartney album. And I'm like, man, some of this stuff is like better than Magical Mystery Tour or like half of the White Album. Like there's some really amazing stuff, and it just cemented that I'm so much a Paul McCartney fan rather than a John Lennon fan.
Well, you have to think like there was, so really, if you're looking at it just to scale, we had 7 years worth of Beatles recordings, like 7 years worth of Beatles releases and albums. And then since 1970, you've had Paul McCartney albums and you've had his iterations. So you do have there's a lot. The guy's prolific. So there's a lot to dig through there for sure.
And I was watching an interview with Ringo recently, and Ringo actually said the reason why the Beatles put out so much material in such a relatively short period of time is because of Paul. Because he was he was the workaholic. He was telling the story of how him and John would be, in the garden smoking something or other, and then they would hear the phone ring and they'd be like, and not answer the phone because they knew that it was Paul being like, hey, let's get in the studio, guys. Like, I got ideas. Let's do this.
Amazing.
So yeah, he was kind of the driving force behind, hey, let's get in the studio and record some stuff. Let's work. Let's do this.
Yeah. I'm looking at this. It's 15, it looks like, solo albums plus 7 Wings releases. You got the Firemen, and then there's about 6 or 7 other covers albums, soundtracks. I mean, his body of work is insane. Obviously, he's a Beatle, so what are you going to say? Yeah.
It's and Ringo himself puts out a ton of work that doesn't get the attention that it deserves. So and man, they're getting up there. He's 79 years old. Ringo is I think 82 or 83. And and we'll get into this in just a second here, but we just lost an 80-year-old legend with Charlie Watts. So it's scary for me as such a huge Paul fan, because I'm not going to be okay when Paul goes. It's not going to be a good day for me.
Yeah.
But that's been it.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk a little bit about some news and some stuff that's going on. So Charlie Watts, like we said, since the last time we spoke, dead at 80. Iconic. Obviously, Rolling Stones don't get much bigger. Joined the band in 1963, and up until this year, never missed a show.
Wow.
He always seemed to me a little out of place with the kind of antics of Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. Just seemed like sort of the understated member of the group, but man, bedrock of rock and roll
for sure.
It's pretty crazy, and it does make me think. You do have, so we have 2 Beatles. We've got most of the Who. We got most of Led Zeppelin, I think, right? Man, drummers. But
yeah, what is it with drummers? Man.
But like no Ramones really, except for a drummer. We've got Marky Ramone, and that's it. And there
He's
were
the
a lot of
only
drummers in the
original, right?
Ramones. Yeah, there's no.
Oh, not
I mean,
that he was necessarily the
not
original,
even.
but-
There was. Yeah, it was all over the place. But he was on most of the iconic albums. But
I lose track of the Ramones.
there's
that's
so
hard to
many
keep
of them,
track
dude.
It's like trying to keep up with who's playing guitar in the Red Hot Chili Peppers this week. So I don't know.
But you got to
I don't
think
know.
like we have most of these bands like Aerosmith and Rolling Stones, and then we've just got no Ramones. Like that
No Ramones.
band burned. And I love the Ramones, and that band burned fast, like
Yep.
crazy. But rest in peace, Charlie. Another that we lost recently was Don Everly of the Everly Brothers. His brother Phil had died a few years back. What's crazy is their mother is still alive. I think she's like 102, 103.
word.
It's so crazy, man. Like it's wild. But just you're talking about another group that's the bedrock of what we call rock and roll. I mean, hits like all across the board. Wake Up Little Susie, All I Have to Do Is Dream, Bye Bye Love. These are songs that I heard. I didn't even know it was the Everly Brothers. I just heard them growing up from my grandparents and my parents. They would sing them to you to go to sleep.
Yes, exactly.
And we'll get into this on our B-side a little bit about artists influencing artists, and there's a lot there that you can point to, but this group, I mean, there's no, you can say there's no Beatles. There's probably no Simon and Garfunkel. They got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with the first group of 10 in 1986. Neil Young inducted them and said during his induction speech that night that every group he'd ever been part of had tried and failed to copy the Everly Brothers and their harmonies. I mean, this is a group that merged R&B and country into pop.
Yep.
That rockabilly rocking beat that blended everything and then kind of shattered from there, and everybody took their snippet of it and made it, whether it was that blues country influence or the R&B, like everything kind of starts with the groups of that era.
Yeah.
You think of Buddy Holly, you think of Elvis Presley, but the Everly Brothers were really that group. When you watch That Thing You Do and you see that iconic kind of looking TV performances, like that was the Everly Brothers.
For sure. And we were talking about kind of the Strokes coming on the scene and defining a sound of a certain time period. That was the Everly Brothers for their time period. There's so many groups that came immediately after kind of tried to take that sound that they just put their stamp on a whole generation of music and tried to run with it. So, that's hard to replicate when something like that happens. It's lightning in a bottle, and there's, you can't probably predict it and you can't replicate it. Yeah.
And then I wanted to bring this up quickly just for Dan. And to shout out to all the fabric store workers out there at Joann's and the Hobby Lobby.
Michael's.
Michael's. Carole King's Tapestry just certified diamond again for the 13th time. 13 times diamond. The streaming numbers, I always forget how it goes, but this is starting to take streaming into consideration now.
Right.
I think it's like 15 or 30 streams equals a sale or something. It's something to that effect. But I mean, all the songs. It's You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman, I Feel the Earth Move, You Got a Friend, Will You Love Me Tomorrow? Again, another foundational release in music for everybody.
Absolutely. And I still listen to it to this day. I will throw it on doing the dishes, whatever, throw it on. You just feel good.
Hell yeah.
Good song, good album.
Got a couple things here in music history if we want to kind of dive into this a little bit.
Yeah, we can do this real quick before we flip it over. Do you want to talk about the big bootleg bust? Because I don't really know anything about this.
Yeah, so it's a funny thing happened. So, and the reason why I wanted to bring it up is I'm assuming that you had blank CDs and remember the era. Like I'm sure everybody who's listening to this is of the age that they do. I mean, look, I recorded songs off of the radio on cassette tape, so it was started before there. But you couldn't really bootleg vinyl. There was not really a way to do that super well. It was possible. It was happening, but not as convenient as once you started getting cassette tapes and then compact discs specifically. And so you did have a lot of bootleggers. I don't know if you had any stores that were selling stuff like that by you, but I definitely remember the next town over from me had a store. It's gone now, so I'll shout it out, Mother's Music. And I remember going in there and looking for an album or some CDs that I wanted. I wanted The Offspring's Americana. I remember, so that's dating this, I guess that's 97, 98.
Yeah, I don't remember.
No,
exactly.
maybe even later than that. Yeah, but I remember going in there and grabbing it, and it felt funny, and it didn't look
something
like
a little bit off with this.
It didn't look 100% right, and I opened it up, and the CD didn't look right at all. But it was like $7, you know,
Yep. And it sounded the same.
It really did, yeah. And so back in the day, the RAAA worked with law enforcement to start to crack down on this because that is theft.
Right.
And so back in 99, they did a huge like smuggler drug bust type thing here in New York where they found and confiscated 300,000 blank CDs and then just millions upon millions of cassette labels. And the way that they did it, so it was the biggest seizure of illegal material of any sort like that in the entire nation at that point. Like they were being sold all throughout the like northeast of America. But the way that they did it is they like planted decoy CDs in the marketplace and then used that to kind of find out the areas. Like they put them in different stores so that they could see if they were being grabbed and then replicated somehow. It's like they came up with some kind of crazy way of then tracking that to the sort of area, and they found them. I think they were here. It was in New York, like in Queens, and then also out here by me on Long Island. So real quality, yeah. But I don't really remember this happening. I don't remember this story, but I remember, I mean, I have spindles of bootleg that you made or that I made that, you know, girlfriends made for me, whatever, back in the day. But it was such a trip. The one cool thing I'll say before we move on about that bootleg kind of scene, though, is I do remember going into that same store and you would have live shows from bands that were like bootlegs and had some kind of funky artworks that somebody made for it, and that was $5. And there's still a place around here that I won't shout out that sells stuff like that from time to time. And I've been known to grab it because it's kind of cool to get like a live show, and you don't know what the quality is going to be, but you know, it's pretty neat. It's neat. It's a, you know, for $4 or $5, it's a cool little grab bag.
Yeah, I remember learning my lesson with a bootleg live show. I think at the time it was Sublime. I was into them in the 90s, and the quality was just so bad. Like, I don't know how it was recorded, but it sounded like someone just grabbed one of those like little rectangular tape recorders and had it on a tape, because it's like the people talking in the crowd was louder than the music. You know, clearly it wasn't, you know, from the board or anything like that. And it was so bad. And like, I kind of enjoyed it because you get to hear like interesting renditions or different renditions of songs that, you know, but man, the quality was so bad. And I never bought one ever again. So kind of glad that era's over, to be honest.
Yeah. So also same, a couple years later, 2002, you have Kelly Clarkson beating Justin Guarini, first season of American Idol. I did not watch. I was aware of it. I think everyone was kind of aware of American Idol at that point. And to this day, you know, it's still bubbled up and has produced some huge talent, but every time I see Kelly Clarkson or hear something about her, I mean, she still has great songs that come on the radio. And I have to think, like, it's pretty crazy that a TV show, you know, and there's machinations that happen behind the scenes at anything like that. But a TV show spawned this actual legitimate star, this massive star, who's incredibly talented. So very cool. I never heard from Justin Guarini again. I think he did Broadway at one point. Like, he's still out there, but
they did that weird movie together, right? I never
from
saw
Kelly
it.
To Justin, or from Justin to Kelly.
I
or
do
something.
remember seeing the video, like probably at a video store somewhere. I never watched it, but I remember seeing the artwork and being like, they made that? Why did
did they do that? Yeah.
Why did they do that?
And then so Fiona Apple, I mean, such a badass.
Love it.
So in 97, in 97, she wins Best New Artist, VMAs. I didn't realize she was only 19. I thought she was in her 20s at that point. It's pretty crazy. But at the age of 19, she gets up on the stage, and instead of giving an acceptance speech, she quotes Maya Angelou to say that you need to make your own moments, and then says, if you're watching this world is BS. You shouldn't model your life about anything. You shouldn't model your life after what we think is cool, what we're wearing, what we're saying. Like, she just rips it all apart. And it's funny, we talked about the Outkast acceptance speech on a couple episodes ago.
That was a moment,
and
too.
it like, I don't watch award shows. They give me anxiety, so I can't. But I do like, it does give me that kind of, I don't know if this happens anymore, you know? Like, I don't think you have these uncut moments that really happen in these situations. And if you do, then I would tune in. But it does all feel like everyone gets up there and thanks their mom and then 20 other people, including their attorney, and then walks off stage. And I'm like,
well, nothing's really shocking anymore. I think that's part of it. You know what I mean? It's 2021.
It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like it just feels like you checked a box, you moved on, and then, you know, Green Day's performing. And it's like, okay, cool. What do I care? I don't need to.
Yeah, those moments are becoming fewer and farther between, I think. You know, we don't have the guy from Rage Against the Machine jumping up and climbing the set anymore. Like those weird moments. And maybe that was kind of an MTV thing. And you have to kind of wonder maybe, you know, how much of that was, if not staged, maybe kind of encouraged. You know, you've got the Kanye interrupting Taylor Swift thing, like, you know, that kind of stuff didn't really happen at the Grammys, that kind of thing, or the Golden Globes, or the, you know, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremonies. That crap always happened at the MTV stuff. So
is there something else that you want to go off of on here?
Yeah, the only other weird thing that I found, that I can't believe that I never heard of this story before, being a really big ELO fan. So on September 3rd, 2010, Mike Edwards, who is a founding member of ELO, he was actually the cellist in the orchestra part of Electric Light Orchestra. He was killed in a freak accident when a giant bale of hay tumbled down a hill and crashed into his van.
Wow.
He was 62, and it was over 1,300 pound bale of hay rolled down a hill in Devon, South England, and smashed through a hedge and careened onto the road right into his van.
That's insane.
What?
Like, that sounds like Final Destination. That's
no
so
kidding.
Crazy.
Or like Monty Python. Like, it's so weird. And I can't believe I never heard that story before. But rest in peace, Mike Edwards. Obviously, his work is heard on their earlier albums.
Yeah.
I think he was one of them that ended up leaving the band early on. I'm going off the top of my head now, but I think he's one of those that actually he like converted to Buddhism and quit the band and changed his name and stuff like that. So he's got an interesting backstory, and I'm like 99% sure I'm telling that story right, but we'll have to verify. We've got a lot of heavy hitters with the birthdays this week. That. Yeah. So blues guitarist Freddie King. Most people would probably recognize Eric Clapton's cover of his song "Have You Ever Loved a Woman?"
Right.
That he was born in 1934 on September 3rd. September 3rd, 1942, Al Jardine, who was one of the co-founders of the Beach Boys, best known as the rhythm guitarist, also occasionally singing lead. Believe he's the lead on "Help Me Rhonda," if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah. So I was raised with the Beach Boys. I love them. I'd love to do a B-side on them at some point.
Absolutely. Let's do that.
But I've gotten to work with them a bit, and Al Jardine is a wonderful human being. He's an absolutely fantastic person and such a talent.
That's so cool.
Can't speak highly enough of that guy. He's fantastic.
That's great. That's awesome that you've gotten to meet him. And then also September 3rd in 1947, Eric Bell, guitarist for Thin Lizzy, was born. 3rd September 1955, Steve Jones, guitarist of the Sex Pistols. September 4th, 1960, and I know I'm not going to pronounce his last name right, but Kim, it's either Thale. I think it's Thale. I think it's Thale. I know he's like of Middle Eastern descent, right? So I always want to kind of put a little... Thale, I don't know. But forgive me, Kim. Happy birthday. I love your music. I had a poster. I had him on a poster from, I think, Guitar World magazine in my room as a teenager. I was such a huge still a huge Soundgarden fan, massive Soundgarden fan. But yeah, he was, I had like Jimi Hendrix on my wall. I had Kim and I had Green Day. Those were the three on my wall.
Sick.
September 4th, 1981, just 1 year before me, Beyonce, who needs no introduction or explanation.
Queen Bee.
I'm not a huge solo artist Beyonce fan, to be honest, but I will definitely bop to some Destiny's Child.
Oh yeah, we put that on. That was another road trip. Like
nice.
I kind of said to my wife, I'm like, she hasn't heard Destiny's Child yet. I think we could do that. We put on Survivor and she loved it. Yeah, it was a jam.
Love it. And then September 5th, 1946, Freddie Mercury himself was born, needs no further explanation. September 6th, 1943, Roger Waters was born, singer, songwriter, bassist, and co-founder of Pink Floyd.
Nice.
And then we were talking about him earlier, but September 7th, 1936, Buddy Holly himself was born.
Man, lots of tragic deaths in this run here. I see Keith Moon on here too, I think.
I forgot to mention that. Yeah. So died, September 7th, 78 is the day that Keith Moon died of an overdose, which I actually didn't know this. I knew it was an overdose. I actually didn't know that it was a prescription drug overdose. Granted, he had dozens
of things.
So it wasn't probably the prescribed amount, but it was a drug that was prescribed to him actually to combat alcoholism, which is kind of ironic. Yeah, it was Hemenevrin. I'm not good with pronouncing medications, but it was specifically prescribed to combat his alcoholism. And he just he had like 30 something pills in his system. So,
Jesus.
He
awful.
What do you say about Keith Moon?
Bombastic. Yeah.
He didn't do anything, that wasn't
big.
To the extreme. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then a few more quick birthdays. Gloria Gaynor, born September 7th, 1947. Obviously, probably best known for I Will Survive. Chrissie Hynde, one of my favorites, lead singer and founding member of The Pretenders, September 7th, 1951.
Yeah.
And then September 7th, 1964, Eazy-E himself, rapper with NWA and a solo artist himself. And that pretty much wraps up the birthdays for the week. And I think also wraps up our side A.
Yeah.
And when we come back, I'm going to try to expand Liam's mind.
Do it.
With Radiohead. And I don't even know where to start really, but I think we'll probably just go album by album. And
I have questions, and I have questions too.
Okay, good, because I will have answers.
Okay,
but we're going to expand your mind, and even if you don't become a Radiohead fan by the end of it, the goal here is that maybe you have a different perspective on why somebody like me, who's a massive Radiohead fan, is such a massive Radiohead fan. But we're going to flip it over, and we'll see you back here on side B with Retro Groove. Welcome back. We are here on side B of this episode Ocho of Retro Groove. And we came up with this idea for a segment where one of us chooses an artist that is pretty widely accepted as, a A+, top-notch artist that we either just don't really get it, don't really listen to it, and don't understand it, or we just flat out dislike. And so on this first iteration of what we have dubbed as Expand My Mind, I'm going to discuss Liam's
I don't understand it. Yeah. I don't get it. Yeah.
I can't really find a noun for it, but
it's tough.
I'm going to convince Liam that Radiohead deserves their stature in the music world.
Yeah. I'm going to precursor this by saying that I have with Radiohead what I have with, say, Nirvana, what I once had with Oasis. I think it's a sign of my age and when I came into my own pop music, and I use the pop term loosely, but whatever is trending, whatever's music. Happening. Yeah. When I came into that, it was mid to late 90s, and finding my own identity and understanding of my surroundings. But I do think that I might have missed certain things with some of these bands. Oasis, I needed someone to kind of walk me through it a little bit and show me a few things before I could get the appreciation. Nirvana, I've never gotten there, but I'm open to it at some point.
Wow.
But Radiohead, I feel like I'm a good mixtape and maybe a documentary away from really liking this band. But right now, it's just meh. Like, I get it. I appreciate the heck out of what they did for alt rock, just like a bunch of other artists that we've talked about. But so let's go to where you punched in, because mine is going to be very different than yours.
So me personally, I feel like I was a Radiohead from the very beginning. I did have Pablo Honey on CD.
Wow.
Obviously, the average person probably only knows Creep.
Yeah, Creep was huge.
I mean, it's a cultural... When you have Dave Chappelle singing Creep with Foo Fighters in Madison Square Garden, that is a widely accepted hit song.
But it was at the time. It was at the time. It was at the time, and it's one of those songs that even if you didn't know it was Radiohead, like when you hear it, you're like, oh, I know that song. Yep. I know Creep. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously that was the big hit. And I did like the album, and I would listen to the whole album start to finish. There are actually some great songs on that album, but it's one of those albums that it is kind of it's one of those, like, I call it like a period piece album, where the album itself doesn't necessarily stand the test of time, but when you go back and listen to it, you're transported back to the 90s. It's just, It's got that sound. It's like that particular, production, the particular like gate on the snare that's just like, oh, this is an album that was recorded in the early 90s. You know what I mean?
Right,
it just,
right.
that sound is there. But it, maybe carried a lot by the success of Creep, brought them a lot of attention and renown. And then they go on and record The Bends. So this is when I went from a casual fan to, oh my God, this is one of my favorite bands. I want to learn all of these songs on guitar, and I want to know everything about, this group. I believe my first introduction to the Bends album was seeing the Just music video. I don't know if you remember the video.
Don't.
But it was just that song. It comes in with the acoustic guitar, and then the chunka, just a heavy electric guitar. and it goes through that quiet verse, super loud chorus kind of thing that was becoming more popular. And I think probably the Pixies made that famous, but I loved it. And there was started to be kind of those computery sounds that they went, full blown with on the next album, OK Computer, with songs like the first song, Planet Telex, where you've kind of got a very kind of shimmery and kind of electronic sounding without using any electronic instruments kind of feel to it. But then you've got these just blowout ballads like Fake Plastic Trees. And it just had such a landscape to it. And if there's anything about Radiohead that I would want to convey is that, taking it at face value, okay, I can understand not necessarily getting it, but one thing that I think they are masters of is creating that sonic landscape. And I know that might not make sense to a lot of people, but when I listen to Radiohead, at least, I'm absolutely transported. I'm taken somewhere else entirely. And it might not even be a physical place. It might be like another plane of existence. It's just one of those things that through the combination of their
arrangement,
the sound that they craft through the various instruments, whatever it may be, using technologies and instruments. I can't think of any other artist that used a chaos pad and put that on an album. You know what I mean? Like, how do you take something like that that's such a weird kind of, that was probably intended for DJs to like mimic scratching and be like, oh, let me put my voice into this and move my finger back and forth on this touchpad and create a sound that no one's heard before.
Yeah, I'll say, admittedly, so the Benz is one, it's probably like 6 years ago, I said to myself that I should go back and figure this out. And I dipped my toe in and then I gave up. But the Benz is the album that actually stuck with me the most. I mean, My Iron Lung is a great song.
Yes.
High and Dry is a great song. I did wind up it's funny, I didn't know what the singles were. I wasn't aware of all that at the time. And then when I went back and looked at this today, and I was like, I was listening back to the album today in anticipation of this, and I was like, well, these are the songs that I really liked, and I was like, oh, these are all the songs that were the singles that were put out. I didn't have the affinity as deep as one might think on this album, but there is that, like, the appeal to me on this album is that it's dynamic. There's a lot going on, but it doesn't feel oppressive to me in most situations. It feels measured and calculated. But I'm assuming it's also because they were figuring that out at the time. Like, this was their stepping stone towards what Radiohead will then become when I am then introduced to them a little later on. And so in going back to this, I found this nice little crossroads of like, where maybe the limit of my understanding and appreciation bisects with their upwards trajectory as creative beings or a creative entity. And I found this nice little middle ground in the Benz. And then I can't find any more. So I need
well, it's like, I feel like with them, if you do follow the trajectory of their studio albums, it starts to flow. You start to get it because you can hear, like I was mentioning, those kind of early hints of what was about to happen with OK Computer, right? Obviously, OK Computer came on the scene and was just runaway one of the top albums of the century.
Most important, yeah.
I think part of the reason for that is that they started to kind of buck against expectations and, embrace really fully what they wanted to do. You've got a song like Fitter Happier, where it's, you know, written prose being spoken by a computer voice. You've got you've got songs where it completely upends what you thought the song was going to do. You've with all kinds of changes, like something like Paranoid Android. And man, there's just so much depth to the sonic landscape of that album. And, you know, I talk about, you know, I talk about that term sonic landscape a lot. And I think a lot of that comes from my experience with Radiohead and almost seeing what they're doing in my mind in you know, visuals.
Yeah. See, that's what I'm kind of missing, I think, is when I listen to it, I am not immersed in it. And maybe I need to listen in a different way. I mean, did you have that kind of sensation of being able to visualize and experience music before Radiohead that you can think of? Was there prog rock bands from the 70s, or was there ELO or whatever? Like, was there anything like that has done that for you or has done that since? It seems like it's a unique thing that I've heard from Radiohead fans about this. It's not world building, but it's sonic world building. It's not
exactly.
Like,
sonic world building is a really good way of putting it.
Like Explosions of the Sky comes to mind for me just because that's what I know of. Yeah.
No, that is definitely akin to what I'm talking about. I can't think of anything before OK Computer that did that for me. Again, with the Bends kind of starting out the like basic building blocks of that, but I honestly can't think of anything like from my childhood or even in my teenage, you know, music listening years before OK Computer came out that really grabbed me, because that was the first album that everyone has that experience of, okay, this is an album that I need to sit down in a dark room and not be listening passively, but experiencing the album start to finish.
So you heard something from OK Computer and you had that happen. You were like, I need to focus.
Right. I think it started with Exit Music. And you know, I bought the album because I already was a Radiohead fan from earlier albums, and I think Paranoid Android was the first kind of single, at least the first single that I had heard. So I was like, oh, this friggin' rocks. I need to buy this album. And of course it wasn't what I was expecting, but what I got was like almost that Pink Floyd experience. And I compare Radiohead to Pink Floyd quite a bit because I feel like they're sort of the Pink Floyd of, you know, the modern era of music.
Oh, okay.
And
interesting.
I feel like a lot of people would have had a similar experience hearing Dark Side of the Moon for the first time that I had with OK Computer. And I have, you know, I wasn't a Pink Floyd fan before I discovered Radiohead and had those experiences with OK Computer. But yeah, I could certainly, I mean, Dark Side of the Moon, you do want to sit in a dark room and just listen and allow your mind to just have these visualizations. It's like a psychedelic experience with no substance involved. That's really honestly how it feels for me.
Well, yeah, so it seems like almost a muscle or something that you need to learn to use, maybe, that I don't even have fully formed because I like Pink Floyd a lot, but I don't have that experience with their music either. But it seems like something that you kind of need to figure out and do to then have an appreciation and have yourself opened to others. I mean, I don't want to make a bad comparison, but I do have a sort of fish effect with Radiohead too, where I'm like, I should understand this. It should make sense to me. It should gel. And I've seen Fish live like 3 or 4 times, and I'm like,
oh, really?
I don't get it.
Yeah.
I can't figure it out. It can't crack the code. Yeah.
I
don't want to compare Radiohead to Fish. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. The comparison does make sense when you're talking about, you know,
A psychedelic experience.
kind of, yeah. I mean, the joke kind of goes that the worst thing about Fish is their fan base. So, and I can kind of get, you know, kind of like what you were saying when we were in the very early talks of developing this idea, is that for some reason there does kind of seem to be somewhat of a snobbish air, but not from I don't get that from the band, but definitely from at least a certain segment of their fan base.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for a band that gives a little distance and has creative control. They're artists. So, like you said, I can't knock the band for maybe not being as accessible. It's like Pearl Jam. You know, they pick and choose what they want to do, and you can begrudge them for not being the pop stars that maybe you want them to be. But I have full appreciation for that, for sure. My thing is more so the people that I grew up, especially when I'm in, we're talking about once I'm in college and early career, the Radiohead fans that I met it was very elitist. It was very much like, how do you not know and love this? And the punk rock muscle in my brain is kind of just like, okay, well, goodbye.
Yeah.
If you're not going to let me in, then I'm leaving. Yeah.
I get that. And it's funny because I was also a big punk fan, and I was very in that, you know, kind of anti-authoritarian mindset at that age. But at the time, I certainly didn't feel that elitism that you're talking about that I know did exist now. I have a funny memory. I do remember being in college in Boston and lining up for the Kid A release on Newbury Street at the Newbury Comics on Newbury Street.
Sweet.
And because my dorm was just a few streets over on Commonwealth from Newbury in the Back Bay. And me and some of my roommates were going to go and, you know, stand in line and get the album. By the time we got there, the line was already like around the block.
Right.
So we were like, crap, this is going to suck. And then I can't remember who it was. It wasn't me, but one of them was like, hey, let's go back to our dorm and grab our guitars and let's go like just play songs until they open the doors. Cause it was like a midnight release thing. And it was like 10:15 or something like that. So we had a bunch of time to kill. We were stupid college kids. We didn't, you know.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah. So we grabbed our guitars and acoustic guitars and came back. And we just like kind of sat against the wall and started playing whatever Radiohead songs that we knew. And the line of like hundreds of, maybe not hundreds, but like a couple of dozen people or more started singing along. And it kind of became this moment. And so I actually kind of always associate that memory with Radiohead. So that elitism never entered my mind. We actually even had somebody come up to us afterwards, and I think she worked for a local radio station. She was like, hey, I like recorded this, or she asked if she could record it, like if we could do it again. And cool. Like, hey, can you do that again? And can you record this? Can I record this and, you know, put it on the radio?
As a piece.
And we were like, no, you're not going to put us on the radio, corporate lady. You know, we're not going to put on a show for you.
Amazing.
So I do understand what you're talking about with like the kind of snobby elitism. And maybe that was more, I don't know if you were in the New York area at the time. So maybe that's kind of how it was in that region, perhaps.
Maybe. Yeah. But I think that it's, so I punched in at that point. You said Kid A. So that's where other than hearing Creep and Paranoid Android, I heard Kid A and Amnesiac when I was in high school. So I graduated high school in 2002. So I'm kind of coming into my own as it pertains to alt rock and finding out what I missed, and again building my identity as you do when you're in high school heading into college. And my understanding of Radiohead was Kid A and Amnesiac, and I remember seeing the Knives Out music video, and it didn't make sense to me. It just like that was the identity that was Radiohead to me, right?
Yeah.
Your first impression is so big, and so when I hear these oddball, off the wall electronic sounds, the dissonance, again, like big production, crazy stuff, but like I'm looking for melody, and I gotta say, like going back to it now, they're melodic geniuses, really. Like they weave melody into places where it probably shouldn't belong.
That's well, you're helping me make my point with with that, because that's where I was going to go. Is that if you're coming into Radiohead with, like you said, Amnesiac and Kid A, it can sound very sparse and it might not make a whole lot of sense. But I felt like coming off of the huge high that was OK Computer, and then when Kid A happened, I already felt like, okay, this makes sense with the direction that they were going from the Bends to OK Computer, and a lot of you had context, unique instruments that they were using. You've got the use of these instruments that I've never even heard of before, and recording methods. You've got songs like Tree Fingers, where it's a recording of a guitar recorded over a very long period of time, sped up something like 64 times. I may not be saying that method correctly, but it's just really, really unique stuff. And yet somehow there's a song in there.
Yeah.
But then you've got, really more straightforward songs like Morning Bell, and it just, it makes you feel a certain way. It evokes emotion. And that's kind of part of it for me. Is I'm not so much a particular music genre fan as I want to feel something. Like if your music doesn't make me feel anything, even if that feeling is, oh shoot, this drum beat is freaking dope, and all I want to do is bop my head to it, that's a feeling. Yeah. So they evoke feelings and emotions through what could be the most simple of melodies and arrangements. I feel like what they were doing with 3 guitars and other instruments on OK Computer, they went to this place of, okay, how can we create this same, like you said, sonic world building with less, with these, electronic instruments and smaller scale production. And I think that's the big success of Kid A, is that they were still able to, and maybe even to a greater extent, create these sonic landscapes with so much less.
But you needed those keys. It feels like you needed, like, I'm wondering if, and this, you're not the person to ask for this, but like, can somebody successfully punch in at Kid A and be like, I get this? Or do you need
probably
the
not?
That's got to be what it is.
That's I think that's one of the problems with Radiohead, is that you might be able to punch in at something like In Rainbows, which is way more balanced. And it just, my favorite thing about In Rainbows is just the fact that I feel like it draws from all of the good things from all of the previous Radiohead albums, jumbles it together, and just creates this beautiful tapestry. That's my favorite thing about that album. And we're jumping forward a little bit, but there's not a whole lot to get into with Hail to the Thief. It's an okay album. It's probably my least favorite Radiohead album. There are some great songs on it, but I feel like it's just kind of mostly forgettable. Mainly because I don't feel like they did, at least not for me, do the world building as you speak, as you mentioned. it's a little bit more.
It's commentary kind of thing, right? It was like they had a message to get across instead of challenging themselves to change and pivot. It seems like they used the tools that they had to create a message or messages or some kind of a work that it didn't seem like they built upon anything. They just used the tools to make something new.
Yeah. And certainly their most political album. And, that never goes over that great unless you're like Rage Against the Machine. And that's literally your entire thing. Right. But it still had some great songs, and it was still kind of a bridge from, okay, we're starting to kind of reshape how we record and reshape how we approach songwriting. And then kind of what happens after in Rainbows that actually even almost polarized me as a fan is you get King of Limbs. And this brings up kind of what'll be my probably my final main plea as as someone who's a huge Radiohead fan that is trying to convince somebody, is you have got to at some point see them live. So I don't know if you've gotten that chance yet. And I feel like
did, yeah.
I feel like that's a very weak argument, but I was not a fan of King of Limbs when it first came out.
Okay.
I didn't get it. Some of the polyrhythms didn't settle well with me.
Interesting.
It has some of that sparseness that you had with Kid A. And I was like, disappointing. I kept giving it a chance because with a lot of Radiohead stuff, you just have to kind of digest it a bit before it really sinks in.
Right.
And it wasn't until I saw them play many of these songs live, and I actually got the opportunity to see them do their taping, their Austin City Limits episode taping. I submitted my entry, and I actually was selected by lottery to attend that taping.
Wow.
And if you watch that episode, you can see me and my wife at the time. The camera actually zooms right in on our faces during the second song for a few seconds. So I myself am somewhat immortalized in that Austin City Limits episode.
Amazing.
But the way that they portray these songs live, and you can actually see it if you go and on YouTube and watch, I think they call it like the Scotch Mist sessions or something along those lines, where they are playing the songs live in the studio the same way that they play them live outside in live venues. The songs take on a completely different life.
Okay.
And, I think that probably came from, I think most of that album was just kind of recorded by Tom on a laptop. And then the band came together and was like, okay, how do we do this live? You know what I mean? Yeah. But what they did do is they, as a live band, took what, was originally recorded as weird little audio loops on a laptop and fleshed it out to create these ridiculously complex and beautiful sonic landscapes. And that's what they do so well. And I mean, you've got songs like Lotus Flower, where there's really not a whole lot to the song if you break it down, but it's just so much greater than the sum of its parts when you stop trying to kind of figure it out and just allow the song to take you somewhere. And that's why Radiohead just clicks for me, is for some reason, I don't know if everybody has that experience, and I don't know if it's something that you can tap into or learn, or if it's just, you know, my weird messed up brain that that has that, you know, kind of reaction to certain types of music. But you know, that always did it for me, was when I would just, if I can close my eyes and listen to it and I'm transported somewhere else, that's my favorite band right there.
Yeah, I think trust is a big thing that comes up a lot when you're talking about what music can do for you. And I'm wondering, so you said when you first heard King of Limbs, you were a little taken aback, or it didn't connect. You maybe were even a little disappointed or just confused. And do you feel that anticipation / maybe even a little concern? I mean, it's been 5 years since the last album, right?
Mm-hmm.
Moonshaped Pool,
which we haven't gotten into yet. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but do you feel that as you're awaiting new Radiohead or what they're going to do next, that you're kind of like, I hope that this gels. I hope that this is there for me. I hope that I'm still on this ride, or is there not that at all?
I feel like they've hit a happy medium. I absolutely loved A Moon-Shaped Pool, as absolutely heartbreaking as it is. I mean, imagine, you know, Tom York is not the most bright and cheery fellow anyway.
No.
And, you know, a lot of bleakness and, you know, depressing imagery, whatever, you know, you want to call it. But then A Moon-Shaped Pool comes along, and this is basically his breakup album. This is his divorce album.
Really?
Yeah. So it is even more heartbreaking from a lyrical standpoint than a typical Radiohead album would be.
Okay.
And actually for me, that makes it sometimes a little bit difficult to listen to. I was also going through a divorce at the time that album came out. So that album hit very differently for me than maybe most people.
Yeah.
But I can still go back and listen to it, and oh my God, this is beautiful. This does transport me somewhere, even if it's somewhere that I don't want to be, or if it's somewhere scary. It has that transportational effect to it. And to answer your question, I don't know where they're going next. I'm excited to see what they're doing next, but it seems like they've hit a happy medium, and I feel like it's just going to be an evolution of what they did on A Moon-Shaped Pool, where, similar to in Rainbows, it's not hardline in one direction. It's kind of a culmination of all of the things that have come before, melded together very, very well. At least that's what I'm hoping for. You know, they could make a complete left turn, and, you know, the only instrument on the album is a single violin. Who knows? They could do something absolutely ridiculous. But
you have a trust in them to the extent that when they put something out, you're going to give it the time maybe it needs. You're going to give it a bunch of listens. You're going to
absolutely
attempt to patch into it.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be one of those things where I'm buying the vinyl day one, regardless of whether I've heard a single note from it or not. That's where I'm at with them.
Yeah.
And even if it's the case of something like King of Limbs, where I didn't get it and I didn't hear it until I heard it in a different context, I'm still here for it. And whatever it is, I hope it sways you, and I hope it's, you know, accepted and appreciated by everybody. But if there's something to be said for a band that can last as long as they have, first of all, that can kind of make so many different pivots and different changes in how they're portraying their ideas without changing the lineup at all. It's the same five dudes, basically. I think they kind of added Nigel Godrich as a, sort of unofficial sixth member as a producer, and he played with them live. I'm not sure if he still does, but regardless, basically the same dudes for God. Got to be coming up on 40 years here at some point soon.
Mm-hmm.
They have, like we talk about in the intro every episode, they have stood the test of time, and their albums hold up, and they're always going to be a band that will create an experience that, even if it is frightening or political or it hurts a little bit, it's something that I'm definitely excited to dive into.
Yeah. And it's interesting. So Nigel's produced basically every album with them, right? They've never really worked with other producers. They didn't have their U2 Danger Mouse window or anything like that.
Right.
Like, I think he's pretty much done everything with them, at least for the most of their catalog. I think one thing that I probably need to do is kind of push myself to appreciate. So I am always a very vocal and lyrical forward person, and I know that there's a lot in Tom's vocals and his lyrics. I definitely remember hearing him and being like, if I'm going to go for haunting, lilting vocals, I'm probably going to go to Cornell, like I'm like Chris Cornell, like the way that he kind of does that sharp but ethereal vibe has always just spoke to me more than kind of Tom's lilting thing. But I feel like what I'm kind of realizing is that it's all, to varying degrees, but often equal parts in that band. And it's not a singer with some music behind them. Right. It's a bunch of different pieces that are all fitting in, and the words and the way that the words are being performed are all just as important as the synth sound and the sample that's butting up against Johnny's guitar. And I think I need to step back and appreciate it all rather than like trying to figure out what Tom is meowing about. Right. I feel like I get too hung up on trying to figure out what he's saying, and I don't allow myself to just be immersed in it. And I think that that's an important thing, because when I listen to the Bends, like I said a few years back, I really liked it, and I kept hearing, as we've said with other things, I'm like, High and Dry feels like a seed that Tom York, spit out of his apple, and it grew into Coldplay. Like it's like you think you're Travis and Snow Patrol,
of
and
course.
like all these, like those bands exist because of Radiohead.
Yep.
I imagine. I mean, that's the only thing that makes sense to me.
Like we talked about those bands that create this sound that becomes a thing for a certain time period, and OK Computer definitely did that. I mean, you can look at a band like Cave In that is a complete hardcore band. They are heavy metal.
Right.
OK Computer comes out and they create Jupiter, and he stops screaming for most of it and starts singing and lilting. And they start creating these sonic landscapes. And it's actually, I don't know if you are a fan of theirs or if you've listened to Jupiter recently.
Only know a little bit, yeah.
But oh my goodness, that is an album that I can still go back to and be transported. It is an amazing album. And they created, Radiohead created this kind of
pivot
sound, and a lot of bands kind of followed suit, or at least took a page from that book that they wrote and went with it.
But all of those bands that I was saying don't require the understanding, the work even, or the trust and immersion, it seems, to maybe have that experience that Radiohead does. You can throw the radio on and hear a Coldplay song and you're like, all right, that's a hit. Good job, guys.
Right.
You know,
Right.
But Radiohead, I mean, they've had their quote unquote hits over the years. They've had their singles, but I feel like what we've established here is there's a combination, and maybe it's a combination that's a little different for each person. Like maybe that's what it is. And I definitely feel like as I kind of worked into broadcast, and there's that, like, you know, who knows who, and that definitely gatekeepy elitism. And Radiohead was one of those things that was like sipped like a fine wine. And I'm sitting there and like, I can tell the difference between good and bad wine, I think, but like I cannot taste the cherry notes.
Right.
And like I feel like I'm being judged for not being able to pick up the hints of cedar. And I'm like, I missed something here. And so the great thing is knowing that the bends is a good origin point. I think I need to go to OK Computer. Like, I feel like I'm missing, because I haven't spent a lot of time with it. I remember listening to it years ago, isolated in and of itself with no context, and being like, this is cool, great. But I didn't have all the pieces of the puzzle. I've definitely heard stuff. It's funny that you mentioned In Rainbows as being balanced, because I definitely heard songs off of that when it came out, and I was like, maybe I can get into Radiohead.
Yeah,
this is interesting. Like,
that song is wall to wall excellent songs.
It feels like an almost possible entry point. But we were talking about Weezer. Mark and I were talking about Weezer on the last episode, and there have been probably 3 or 4 now. I mean, you can consider the Toto cover an entry point, I think. There's 3 or 4 points where people got in on Weezer. I mean, people,
that's true.
Throughout their career, a lot of these bands, the same thing with Coldplay, Radiohead is not that band. I think you need to do the work. And I need to, this has helped me kind of put out a little bit of a roadmap to figure out, like, okay, I can see the destination, and I can see what it will sound like and why it's worth it and what's there. I just haven't found what can take me to that place.
Yeah, and you know what? It is very possible that they are the J.R.R. Tolkien of the music world, where it's like, you know, there is more backstory here than I will probably ever be able to consume. But yeah, sure. If you can read and understand the Silmarillion, you would probably appreciate, you know, the Lord of the Rings a lot more. You know what I mean? Whereas most people, they're like, you know, oh, The Hobbit's dope, and that's it. And I know that, and that's the hit. You know, that's creep. And so I think that you do get a deeper appreciation of it if you maybe did experience those albums when they did come out. But I honestly do think if you sat down and didn't have anything else going on, and you weren't passively listening, and you gave OK Computer a start to finish shot, if you don't get it after that, you just don't like Radiohead. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean? People have different tastes, and that's totally fine. But if I think you will at least get it a little bit more, for lack of a better term, if you did sit front to back and actively listen. Plus, I get it. Who's got the time to even do that nowadays? But if you did, I think that it would start to gel for you, because that, even being a fan prior to that, was the pivotal moment, was the transformational experience for me.
Well, I have a 1.5 to 2 hour long nighttime solo drive coming up this Thursday night.
That is absolutely perfect.
I think I will be earmarking for that then. Yeah.
If there's any better setting for a front to back Radiohead album than sitting in a dark living room, it is driving in the dark. Absolutely.
Yeah, by yourself. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the Karma Police video is a guy driving at night. That is just the perfect setting for that album.
So I'm gonna give that a try, and next episode we'll see how that went.
Fantastic.
Cool.
So before we wrap up, did you have any other pressing questions or queries about the group, or something maybe a little bit, off key that you don't understand that you think could be remedied with a quick answer or anything along those lines?
I don't think so. Although, as a fan, do you find yourself following the solo projects? I know EOB, Johnny does a lot of scoring. Like, do you go down the rabbit hole? Is it like a full on thing? Because I know some Radiohead fans that I know, they get into everything. They've got every single thing that they've ever done. I think Tom did the score to, or the soundtrack to a weird horror movie like 3 years ago
Suspiria.
or something. And they put that on. Yeah. So I wonder, like, are you that in that sense, or are you just like, Radiohead is what they've built for me as a fan, and this is what I'm tapped into, and like, this is the journey that I'm on. It's whatever they put under the Radiohead moniker.
Well, just like how I talk about, I'm not a fan of a particular genre or, small grouping of genres. I like whatever grabs me, regardless of genre or who it is or whatever. With that said, none of the Radiohead side projects or solo projects have really grabbed me all that much. I mean,
Okay.
I've listened to the EOB album. It's great. There's nothing wrong with it, but I can't see myself ever really having a reason to go back and listen to it. I love the work that Johnny does on soundtracks, but I'm not going to buy or listen to the soundtrack like I would, a Radiohead album. I think the only one that I can think of that I really, really, truly love is Atoms for Peace. You know about them? So you could call them a super group. I'm surprised I didn't bring them up during our super group episode. But I love that album. Amok is what it's called. With all the A words, I got tongue twisted. The album's called Amok. The band is Atoms for Peace, and it's Tom York, it's Flea on bass, and it's Nigel, right?
Right.
And I think they've got other musicians that come in and out, but that album is pretty fantastic. And I do go back and listen to that from time to time. I do have Tom York's, I got his more recent, not the Suspiria album, but
The Eraser.
That's right. I'm sorry. Yes. That's the name.
I know The
of
Eraser
it.
because I remember. So I remember hearing Black Swan, which was off.
I'm gonna have
his
to
solo
correct
album.
myself now. Let me look
That's
it up.
all good. Yeah. So it's The Eraser, and then Atoms for Peace came after that, and then I think that there was something else that he put out, but I'm not. I think he has Tomorrow's Modern Boxes.
Yes, that's another project. I'm sorry. So
Solo
Amok,
album,
Amok is the name of the Atoms for Peace album. It's so confusing because yes, he does have a solo album with very similar cover artwork. And there's a song on that album called Atoms for Peace. So now I am I'm confusing myself even. But no, the album I'm talking about is called Anima. And that it was a Tom York solo album that came out within the past few years. And I bought the vinyl because it's on sale. It never really grabbed me. It's fine. It's good music, but like I've listened to it. It's like one of those movies where I've seen it. I have no reason to go back and watch it again because it just didn't really grab me and make me want to listen to it again. Maybe I haven't given it enough repeat listens for it to really grab me and get under my skin. But to answer your question, I'm not really big on the solo projects and side projects for them. It's not for any particular reason other than I've listened to it and none of it grabs me, certainly not to the degree that Radiohead does. So it's like, why would I listen to EOB when I can listen to In Rainbows or you know one of their any of their other albums? So that's kind of how that goes for me with them.
So it's kind of the antithesis of the Beatles conversation that we were having at the top of this episode, where like obviously they realized that George could write, but it was John and Paul for a lot of that. And Paul was such a driving force and a huge presence in that band that could then stand alone after that band breaks up. But again, going back to what we were talking about before about everything being in varying degrees but equal parts in this band, it seems like maybe they need to have the group for it to be greater than what they are individually.
Well, that's definitely possible because you've got Johnny, who is the composer and soundscapist, for lack of a better word, just creating amazing and otherworldly sounds. You've got Tom, who's kind of principal songwriter with the lilting voice. You've got Ed, who is just rock solid, creates beautiful melodies and harmonies and great guitar player. And then you've got one of the most impressive rhythm sections, of any modern group. And all of it comes together, and it's so much greater than the sum of its parts. And I think you hit the nail on the head with that.
Yeah.
All
well,
right.
cool. I mean, this is a big help. I appreciate you walking me through all of this. I definitely feel like I'm coming out of it with a greater appreciation and some homework that I'm actually kind of excited to do.
Heck yeah. I would definitely want to hear about your night drive OK Computer experience and see how that goes. We might make a Radiohead fan out of you, but again, it might just not be your thing. Yeah, and that's totally cool. But at least I made the effort and we've got a dope episode out of it. So
yeah.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to try to expand your mind. And next episode, you're going to try to expand my mind. And do we want to try to tease anything or?
Yeah, sure. I think we're going to try and channel Mr. Mojo Rise in and dig into the Doors a little bit.
Yeah. And if we try to keep it very positive on this show, and I try not to, use the H word, but if I had to pick one band that is probably, widely recognized as, a classic, A+ group, I really hate the Doors. I really can't. I cannot for the life of me figure out why anybody would want to listen to them. But we'll get into that next time, and I'll save the negativity for off the air. But thank you, Liam, for allowing me to try to expand your mind, and I'm looking forward to that episode.
Thank you.
And I will approach it with an open mind and a willingness to have my mind expanded and changed.
That's what we're all about here.
Absolutely. And for you, thank you for listening to Retro Groove. We are a part of the RetroLogic network. Check out the website, retrologic.games, for social links, merch, community, and more. And we will see you next time.